Elephants in the Boardroom is brought to you by our friends at Achilles. Achilles is a sustainable supply chain risk management company. They support the world's biggest companies to create and maintain ethical, sustainable, and transparent supply chains. While we navigate our way through the elephants in the boardroom, Achilles are leading the way, helping businesses navigate the risks and opportunities associated with many of these grey elephants. So if you're a person who is interested in the impact of change on your supply chains or your ESG strategies, it's worth speaking to Achilles. Head over to achilles.com and tell them we sent you. Welcome to the Elephants in the Boardroom podcast. My name is Graeme Codrington, recording live. Well, you always record live, I suppose, but I am live in my studio in Johannesburg today, joined as always by my friend, my colleague, fellow futurist, Dean. Where are you today, Dean?
Hi, Graeme. Hi, everyone. I am just south of London. I often make a bit of a joke about the fact that I moved to the UK around about 20 years ago, and I've been slowly migrating southwards back towards South Africa. So I'm now halfway between London and Brighton. It's a very slow trek, but I'm making it further south.
I think you're just chasing the sunny weather as climate change brings Mediterranean climates to the south of England. You'll be moving to one farm in Brighton next.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the day we have palm trees on Brighton and coral reefs. So, probably in about a decade.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us, everybody. Hopefully this isn't your first time listening to us. If it is, you've got a few episodes to catch up on, and that's probably a good idea to go back into the archives. But here at Elephants in the Boardroom, we have a look at those forces that are shaping the world around us, but we call them elephants in the boardroom because although they are reasonably obvious, they're already in the house, these are the sorts of trends that people are ignoring. You wouldn't imagine people would ignore them because they're huge and they're going to change the world, like climate change. But we believe at Tomorrow Today Consulting that these are being ignored. Not ignored that we don't know about them, but ignored because we are not letting these trends influence our strategies. And specifically, we're not looking for the opportunities that many of these trends bring. So each month, we bring some insights to you as well as an interview, and we are glad that you are along for the ride this month. Dean, what are you seeing in the world at the moment? What's caught your attention in the last few weeks?
Just to add a little bit more to what you were saying there about these grey elephants, and I think what we're seeing is there are 7 grey elephants, and they've emerged out of COVID. They've really sort of have identified them like pandemics. They're high probability, high impact, but they're largely ignored. And these 7 forces are converging. In many cases, they're colliding, and they're creating what our research is showing is a sharp transformation, a once-in-a-century transformation. And it's a very exciting time because it's a time when you can really grab opportunities to create or shape the future. So that's what we like to do. I have a look at our grey elephant radar and see what are the forces that are shaping things and new opportunities that are emerging. Now, during the last episode, Graeme and I think we went down a little bit of a rabbit warren talking about World War III or the probability of a large-scale war. And I think, it's been, if you look around at Gaza, things are happening in Iran, the Ukraine, the probability of a large-scale war is increasing. But we're still seeing this as a subject that many leaders are sort of shying away from. I was thinking, how do we turn this into an advantage? If you're in missile development or tanks or military hardware, you're probably looking at your bank balance going up quite nicely at the moment. But for for other businesses and commercial organizations, you're probably thinking of this and it's just a massive risk. And how do you manage that? But I came across a really great article recently. One of the big opportunities is basically underground data fortresses. Okay. And what we're seeing is that because information is being considered the new gold, people are taking advantage of this and they're converting old nuclear bunkers, mines, and mountains are being transformed into these data storage centers. So I thought there's a great example of some really entrepreneurial thinking and how we can use these subterranean data centers to really protect the data that is really the lifeline and the blood of our modern day economy.
What an amazing thought, Dean. I mean, obviously, and we have a few clients who are in the so-called hyperscaler industry, building those massive big data centers. And there's all sorts of both opportunities and threats around the amount of water they need, the amount of power, the cost and infrastructure build. But of course, we talk about our data being in the cloud and everything else, but it's not literally in the clouds. It's in a physical facility somewhere. And you would imagine that if two big countries go to war, bombing the other country's data center could wipe out all of their control systems for their infrastructure, could wipe out their banking, could significantly harm the economy and, switch off all their telecoms. So these are the key strategic assets to political and economic environments. It really, really does make sense for the guys who are building the data centers to look at seriously protecting that against, extreme conditions. And one of those would be war. So, we've got a few mining clients. I wonder if they would listen and imagine, because, we've been down those mines. That'd be a perfect place, some of the old mines, wouldn't you think, to put a data center?
Other than potentially the high temperatures that you start to get as you go further and further into the Earth's crust, you can imagine these being an ideal diversification for some of our big mining clients. I know one of our mining clients has a shaft that goes down 4 kilometers deep in South Africa. And if they're listening to this podcast, there might be a new diversification income stream there for them to tap into.
Yeah, no, exactly. What was that old comment about the gold mining industry, that the people who got the richest were the people who sold the shovels? Because whether or not you found gold, you still needed a shovel. I'm thinking in this world, I think I'm probably going to invest in an air conditioning manufacturer somewhere, because whether you're above ground or underground, you need to cool down those things, or whatever the cooling technology is also going to be significant.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a really great opportunity. You can make a lot of money out of investing in air conditioners. You've got global warming on the go, and it's another conversation I've been thinking about, Graeme. I think we're well past the time of thinking about how we're going to reduce the impact of global warming. And we've got to start preparing for a world that is 2 degrees and over, and how we learn to live in that world. And there was something we asked ourselves around the time of COVID. If you remember, we were saying, COVID's not going away. We need to learn how to live with COVID. How do we respond? How do we lead through that pandemic, and a pandemic that's not just going to then disappear? And I think that's the same thing we're seeing with global warming. It's not going to go away. It's going to hit 1.5 very soon, if not already past 2 degrees within the next decade or two. We've got to seriously start thinking about how we start to live with global warming, as opposed to how we turn the tide. Of course, I think we still want to look at ways in which we can reduce its impact, but the serious consideration now is how we live in a world that is 2 degrees warmer and higher.
Those are great examples, aren't they, of the fact that there are these things. We're not telling you anything you don't know, but we are asking you, do you actually have a plan? It's one thing to acknowledge something's happening or could happen, but it's another thing to say we are incorporating that into our strategic thinking, and we are mitigating any threats coming, and maybe more importantly, we are beginning to identify potential opportunities that might emerge.
One thing there, Graeme, it goes back to that saying we often have, is that when a grey elephant appears, it's too late to prepare. Now, it's a little bit twee, but it's really true. Yeah, you want to be identifying these as weak signals, identify the opportunity, manage the risk, and take advantage of creating the future. So what have you been seeing? What's on your radar, Graeme? What have you been seeing?
Well, as we record this, we have just had the 2025 United Nations General Session in New York. That's when all the leaders of countries around the world get together. They each get given 15 minutes although they don't have any timers. Donald Trump went for nearly an hour in his 15 minutes. They each get supposedly 15 minutes. And for me, there are weak signals in that. And this links into one of our big themes of multipolarity, which the simplest way to describe it is the reordering of the world's systems, especially geopolitical systems. And just simply, without necessarily making a comment on whether I think the United Nations is good or bad, right or wrong, should continue or not, that was certainly the theme, maybe more than I can remember of any year. I normally do watch that United Nations assembly quite carefully, because each country gets this moment to showcase themselves and to say something literally to the whole planet. I mean, that's essentially what it's designed to do. A number of African leaders stood up and took their 15 minutes to say, why is a continent that contains 50 countries, nearly, a quarter of the world's countries, and about a quarter of the world's population, why do they have no representation in the most important parts of the United Nations, especially the Security Council? And they were calling for equal representation for Africa. The Security Council goes all the way back 80 years, right? It's the 80th year of the United Nations, and they kind of haven't rejigged it in 80 years. We know 80 years ago it was colonialism and racism up the wazoo, and Africa was just considered completely backward. And is it still racism? Is Africa still backward, or do they have a point? So that was data point number one. Data point number two came from the Colombian president, who basically said that it is unacceptable that the Security Council works with a veto. So there are permanent members who, again, were the big world powers after the Second World War, including Russia, England, China, Japan, so on. And they get the right of veto over every single other nation. So every other nation in the world could vote in one direction. And if one of those permanent members votes against it, that doesn't happen. And that's kind of happened right now with sanctioning of Israel and what they are doing in Gaza, and the recognition of a Palestinian state as an official United Nations entity. And America, and of course Israel, and one or two other small countries, but America just vetoes it every time. I think it's now 7 or 8 times in a row they've done that. I think the Colombian president's got a point, and that we could debate that point, but that actually is not the data point. The data point happened next, which is that the Colombian president then went out onto the streets of New York, because he's a diplomat and the United Nations is in New York and he has a diplomatic passport. And there happened to be a protest on the streets, and he happened to go up to some of the policemen who were quite vigorously sort of pushing back against the protesters. And he just happened to say to the police, you don't just have to do what you're told. In a democratic country, the police, the military are given a mandate to also protect the country against itself sometimes. And he's from Colombia, he should know. For that, but also for his speech in the United Nations, America, who are the hosts, revoked his visa and said, you have to get out of the country right now. And that is completely and utterly unacceptable. He's supposed to have diplomatic immunity for pretty much anything that he wants to do. But certainly freedom of speech should apply to everybody on American soil, you would have thought. Anyway, he's booted out and kind of made a bigger point about the point he was making, right? That right now America really does, the USA really does appear to be in bully boy mode. And that probably is a big enough weak signal about the future of the United Nations as anything else. So anyway, should the United Nations continue or not? We can have that debate. You can decide as the listener yourself. For us, it's a weak signal. It's a signal that says we need to, and we will, and we should reorganize geopolitics. Sorry, Dean, let me get a word in there.
It's a really interesting weak signal, Graeme. And I think the power of the model of the grey elephants and one of our recent models that we're talking about, a BANI world, a world that is brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible are great frameworks to think and to look at these weak signals. And the whole question around the UN and what's happening around the world in different governments. It's not just the United States where we're seeing this change. This is a global phenomenon in which politics is changing and the viewpoints of the electorate and that are changing as well. And you just have a look at the UK, where I'm definitely, I predicted both of Trump's elections based on the grey elephants model, even the one back in 2015, 2016. And that was before he was even the Republican nomination. I predicted that Trump was going to win because we saw what was happening with a rising rage and angry people. And I predict that Farage is going to be the UK's next prime minister. He's probably going to mess it up, and then we're going to have to wait and see where we are after that. But the world is BANI. The word brittle comes to mind. But actually, I think I'm going to push it further. I think the world is breaking. Institutions like the United Nations are being confronted with, how relevant are they? Are they relevant for, as you say, for African nations who represent, a quarter of the world's population and increasingly becoming an economic powerhouse to be recognized? And what is their say, and why don't they have a say? These systems are creaking and straining and breaking. That's the weak signal, is what are the institutions, what are the societal fractures that we are seeing? And then just to, call out to our sponsor, Achilles Information, and, Achilles look at supply chains and help companies protect their supply chain risks. And if you're thinking about how these systems are breaking in world trade and United Nations and how different countries are now starting to position themselves, that has huge implications for your supply chains and, what we call in the grey elephants, the big squeezes. So these are important data points, as you say, Graeme, and it's a great weak signal for people to really get their heads around, start thinking what are the implications for their strategy and how their organizations need to transform. So, yeah, good one, Graeme.
Yeah, thank you. I don't want to argue with you. I argued with you about Trump, and I was wrong and you were right. But my word, Farage anywhere near the levers of power gives me shivers down my spine. But I suppose that's the point, right? We need to at least prepare for the possibility, because you can't just pretend it won't happen and then be surprised when it does.
Yeah, and I heard this saying the other day, you've got to hope for the best and prepare for the worst. And maybe a third one to that, you've got to go out there and create a better world. Which brings me to the point, actually, as you know, I've been a big fan of Fortune magazine's Change the World list. And this month, they've just announced their 11th edition of the Change the World list of companies. And it's 50 mega corporations that are doing well by doing good. Here's a free punt for Fortune magazine. Go out there, have a look at their Google Fortune magazine Change the World list, and have a look at 50 big corporations that are using the power of business to actually drive through positive change in the world. Go and have a look at that. So, Graeme, each month we do a quiz, and I believe it is my turn. You gave me a great one last month. So I think I've got a good one for you this month as well. And it's a little bit left field, although it continues on the theme of military and war. It's really interesting looking at just how warfare is changing and the technology of warfare. And we've seen the rise of drones and that in Ukraine and the Gaza conflict and so on. So my question to you is around unmanned aerial vehicles, aerial drones, okay? And when do you think was the first recorded military use of a drone, of an unmanned aerial vehicle, okay? I've got a list. I've got 4 potential answers for you, okay?
Right.
So 1783, the French Montgolfier brothers used a hot air balloon, all right?
Yeah.
In 1849, Austrian balloons bomb attacked on Venice. In 1898, Nikola Tesla's radio-controlled boat, or in 1935, the British Queen Bee target drone was a pioneering radio-controlled drone built to train anti-aircraft gunners. Okay. Which one was the first account of an unmanned aerial drone? Do you want me to give those answers to you again?
Yeah, no. I've got those in my head. So I'm glad you always make it slightly easier for me because you always give me a multiple choice option. I think I better be kinder to you next time and do that for you. Because if you just left me to my own devices, I probably would have gone back only to the Second World War because that's the one in my head, those V somethings that came across from Germany that were, just remarkably devastating. But I would have guessed that it was probably earlier than that. And of the list that you gave, so radio controlled, I think we probably look. Nikola Tesla could do a lot of things, and I wouldn't put it past him. So a radio controlled boat. The Montgolfier brothers, those balloons, I think, needed people in them to work. So I'm going to go for your second one, the Austrian guys with bombs in balloons. I don't know.
Well done.
I didn't know, but that's my guesswork there. Yeah, did I get it?
You got it. The Austrian forces back in 1849 used approximately 200 incendiary balloons carrying bombs to attack Venice in July of 1849.
Good grief. There's a story I didn't know. I love history and military history as well. Never knew about that. Look, it makes sense, right? You would imagine, I don't know, somebody's probably going to tell us that like in the year 500, somebody in China did it as well, because China pretty much invented all the things that we claim to have invented in Europe long before we did. So there's probably one or two ways in which they've been done. But yeah, imagine what it must have felt like to be in Venice in the 1800s and just death from the sky. I mean, we just say death from the sky because that's the world we live in now and bombs come from planes. But when planes didn't even exist, suddenly just death from the sky must have been terrifying. And I suppose the future of military weaponry and warfare is maybe even more frightening to imagine. So, nice quiz there, Dean. I'm going to go and look that story up. That sounds like an interesting one.
All right. So I think it's time for a break. But before we do, I just want to introduce our guest speaker, our guest on the Elephants in the Boardroom podcast. We're going to be joined today by Øistein Jensen. He's the Chief Sustainability Officer at Odfjell. They're a global leader in commercial shipping. And Øistein brings experience from PwC, and before this, he was a submarine commander in the Royal Norwegian Navy. I mean, what an exciting career. I'd love that title, Chief Submarine Commander. I might even give myself that title, Graeme. What do you think? Somewhere I can work that into being a futurist, a submarine commander?
I know you'd love it. You love the ocean and you love being under the ocean. So I know why you like it. But looking forward to this interview. Let's take a break. If you feel like change is happening faster than your ability to keep up, you're not alone. At Tomorrow Today Consulting, we've worked with hundreds of leaders who felt exactly the same way until they learned how to spot the big changes coming before their competitors did. Here's what we've discovered. The companies thriving right now aren't the ones with the best products. They're actually the ones who saw the disruption coming and positioned themselves ahead of it. And that's what our Grey Elephants radar and framework is all about. We've helped, for example, a global mining company rethink its entire strategy to navigate economic volatility and local unrest, shifting from reactive operations to long-term resilience, and at the same time, delivering unprecedented profits. We worked with a major UK retailer, for example, to turn growing pressure around plastic pollution into a powerful brand differentiator, transforming a risk into a sustainable leadership story. So, whether it's through our Skunk Works innovation labs, keynote presentations and workshops, or our strategic consulting, we're here to turn uncertainty into competitive advantage. So, if you're tired of playing catch up with change, visit our website, tomorrowtoday.consulting, because the future belongs to the leaders who see it coming.
Today, we are joined by Øistein Jensen, Chief Sustainability Officer at Odfjell, a global leader in chemical shipping. Øistein oversees sustainability, compliance, and strategic safety. And he brings experience from PwC, and before that, as a submarine commander with the Royal Norwegian Navy. Yeah, for our listeners who are new to your world, what's the 1-minute version? What do you do? And what are you focused on right now?
Thank you, Dean, and thank you for having me on the podcast. My name is Øistein Jensen, as you say. I'm Chief Sustainability Officer of Odfjell, and we're a global shipping company. We operate a large fleet of large tankers. These tankers operating in the chemical space, so we transport anything liquid, and they are operating all over the world. And the liquids, the chemicals that we transport, they goes into everyday life. Everything that we surround ourselves with, like this plastic pen is something that has been a liquid and produced into plastics. They go into medicine, into paint, into food. So this is our business, and for us, it's important to do that in a sustainable way. Some of the products that we transport are some of the most hazardous liquids that is produced, and we transport that through some of the most fragile environments, through the oceans, and that means something to us. That means something the way we think about safety and sustainability, and as about being long term, about the decisions that we take today that we're going to live with for a long period of time ahead. And I think that the best example of that is our 110 years of history. So this means something to us.
That's great. I love speaking to leaders who work for a company that has a real, genuine purpose and a legacy and a desire to really do the right thing in the world. You know, there's increasing pressure to decarbonize. From your perspective, what does it take for a company like Odfjell to really remain resilient and, I guess, responsible in this environment?
Yeah, that's a one big question, right? It's the kind of the biggest question that everyone that has some interest around shipping is asking. So, very long answer, but to try to make it a little bit short, we really acknowledge the challenge of climate change. We see that this is not something that's only going to happen in the future. This is happening now. It's affecting us now. We see that we have direct climate effects. We have employees living in areas where there have been flooding, where there have been wildfires. This is something that means something to business today. On the direct effect. On the transitional effects, what we're calling, that's where you see changes in regulations, changes in expectations, new requirements, new cost, new technology. All of this is something that we need to adopt to. So the big challenge is that if you're going to transport a product across the Atlantic, the most environmentally friendly way of doing that is to put that product on a ship, because that's the most efficient way of transporting large volume over large distances. But the big challenge is that today there are really no other commercially available alternatives than to do that with a combustion engine. And combustion engines, they tend to emit a lot of CO2, and which is a very challenging greenhouse gas. So that means that the shipping industry emits about 2.5% of the global CO2 emissions. So we are a part of the solution, right? Because we want to transport more on shipping, but we're also part of the problem by emitting a lot of CO2. So the big headache for us is that how do we do that? How can we transform into a net zero business? And I think that's the big question that's all around the International Maritime Organization, the IMO at the moment, because they are the one that regulates this business. So it's mainly internally driven, that we need to, of course, we feel a moral obligation to do something about climate change. But we also have a moral obligations to not go bankrupt. That means that we cannot invest ourselves in something that will put us in a difficult situation towards our competitors. So that's why we support full regulation, that this is something the industry needs to do. And this is what is on the agenda now, that how do you regulate it? How do we establish incentives for technology, incentives for new fuels, and regulation that creates an equal playing ground for all our business?
So we talk about these grey elephants. They are a high probability, high impact forces of change. But because they're big, because they're scary, often we try to ignore them. Carry on with the day job. Hopefully they go away. One of the grey elephants is what we call an angry planet, and it almost feels like the planet is starting to fight back, with wildfires, which you've mentioned, and climate change. But it's bigger than just climate change. It's pollution, it's water scarcity, and things like that. And what we like to look for is what are the weak signals, things that are telling us that there might be a disruption or there might be change. And the key thing about these grey elephants is that they are almost signs of progress. There are side effects to progress. And I think, like you say, the combustion engine was an incredible invention, and it's taken society in leaps and bounds forward. But there are side effects, and we're starting to feel those side effects. And now we need to, these elephants are starting to come into the boardroom, and we need to find solutions with them. If you think about things from maritime sustainability, what are the, let's say, grey elephants or weak signals in sustainability or other areas that you think deserve attention, but they possibly aren't getting that attention at the moment? What are you seeing? What's on your radar?
No, in our boardrooms, there are several elephants, and they are quite visible. And I think that, as you say, one of the biggest grey and very visible elephant is the climate change and adaptation to climate change mitigation. And that has been something that has been really high on the agenda for the industry. It's a big problem, and no one really have seen the solution. There will be multiple different solutions in order to tackle that. And I think that is something that is important. But I also think that there are tendencies that you will think that this problem is so big, so let's wait for someone to come up with a problem. And I think that is the kind of the biggest problem with climate change, is that you think that someone else will solve the problem for you. So, but I also think that the shipping industry have been very proactive. We are the only one that has an international maritime organization. Well, all shipping companies all over the world, because no one else can regulate global shipping. We can regulate national shipping, but the shipping at the high seas, that is something where you need the international body. So this is something that is really high on the agenda for everyone. There will be no kind of one silver bullet. There will be no perfect solution that fits everyone. So there will be multiple different solutions. And I think that there's two important things, or three, or multiple different important things. One is the technology development, that we are really looking into what kind of technologies is possible now to scale things up, to really upscale, both on the fuel side, and propulsion and efficiency. And in our perspective, we see that there are multiple different fuels. That's what everyone's discussing at the moment. But we also think that, okay, we don't have this perfect fuel yet. We have not seen that the final solution. But in the way, we all know one thing is that new fuel is going to be more expensive, and it's beneficial for us to burn less of it. So that's why we focus on energy efficiency. And that has been driving us for a long period of time. And just on an example how that transition is working, if we go back to 2008, when we really started working on this was not at that time driven by a climate perspective and emission reduction. It was driven by a cost perspective, because we wanted to reduce the amount of fuel that we are using. Over time, we have seen that the attention to the emission effects have been really, really increasing. So now we do projects because it makes sense from a financial perspective, but it also have a net positive value for us, because it has a financial effect and it also have a climate effect. And I think that is also what other companies are seeing. And we're seeing this from a risk perspective and also from an opportunity perspective. There will be tremendous amount of opportunities, and this is where we kind of take those kind of signals on that elephant to look at technology, to look at the regulation, how we can impact in order to address that. So that's one of the elephants. The other elephants are, of course, related to geopolitics. And when you're operating in the global trade, geopolitics is certainly a big elephant.
That's a huge one. We refer to the geopolitics as the multipolarity strategy that Russia and Putin are executing and have been executing for the past 2 decades. And we're really starting to see the effectiveness of it now. But I like what you were saying about these grey elephants as opportunities. Because we're strong believers at Tomorrow Today. We're strong believers that the best way to predict the future is to create it. So if you understand how these forces are shaping and changing the world, you can start to get an understanding of their projection. And then you can say, well, what are the opportunities? And how can we use those opportunities to create the future? Because I'm sure you'll agree that the future doesn't just happen; people create it. And progressive companies like yourself that are really looking at these challenging problems and saying, how can we do better? How can we tackle sustainability in different ways and create opportunities out of them? It's a really powerful way to think about things.
One change that we have seen in that perspective is that we see that people and organizations are taking a more holistic perspective. That means that companies, they are much more aware of their surroundings with regards to the footprint of their activities, the footprint of their products. Not only from, if I'm manufacturing shoes, I'm not only for the manufacture of shoes, but I'm also concerned about the logistic on upstream and downstream perspective of that. And that means that we need to look in a wider perspective. And I think that is one of the big changes. And that is also where we see and look at the opportunities. We also see that we have this higher on the agenda. So when you are buying a pair of shoes, more and more customers are conscious about the kind of the footprint of the product that they buy. And that means that the manufacturer and owner of the shoes, they will also want to look at how are they shoes transported from Taiwan to Europe, for example. And that means that will affect us as a transporter. Previously, that has been sort of a non-topic. It has been transported. No one really cared about that. But now you need to report on what's the kind of the value chain as well. And I think that is also something that has changed. And the reason why that has changed is that we have more and more access to data. We know more about it, and it's easier to calculate as well, because we cannot look at everything that we do very isolated. Because one of the things that I forgot to mention initially, or I would like to say there, is that when we're doing this transition, we need to do this in a just and equitable way. And that means that we cannot transfer the problem somewhere else if I just push the problem into a different part of the value chain. So let's say I start using a fuel that when I put it on my tank and burn it in the engine, it has a net zero fuel, but all the emissions comes in the production side, then I would have solved my problem but created a much bigger problem somewhere else. And holistically, that would be a bigger problem. So these are the considerations that we need to take into account. And this gives also an opportunity, because if we represent lower emissions in the transportation part of a value chain, that is a benefit for the owner of the product. And that means that they would sort of select the transportation providers that can provide that gives less footprint than the others. And if I'm better, then they will select me. So it's the kind of incentive there as well that we really would like to encourage.
It's the holistic thinking, and not just passing the buck or kicking the can down the road. And looking for benefits across the value chain, how we create shared value within that ecosystem. And I think what you're touching on is that no company can really tackle sustainability alone. So how is Odfjell approaching partnerships to accelerate progress in areas like supply chain transparency and ESG?
Well, ESG and sort of sustainability captures a wider perspective than the climate that I've been talking about, climate environment that's related to emissions. So everything that we're looking at is also capturing the way we are working with people, with human rights, labor rights, diversity, anti-corruption, anti-money laundering, and all these kind of aspects of sustainability. So being a global industry that operates all around the world, it's important for us to work close with local governments, with organizations where we are operating. We are a quite moderate-sized company, but we're only very small if you put us together with everyone else. And that means that we have a very good collaboration within the industry, within the International Maritime Organization, that is also the regulator and policymaker for shipping industry. And we're also working through the ship owner associations. And we're also looking at technology development and building or almost partnership on developing technology, or where we are using technology for energy efficiency. And we have also been quite vocal about what we think about these things, and attending podcasts and conferences where we talk about the effects of what we do. So I think that's some of the things that we are working on from a partnership perspective, and we are trying to be very transparent and share successes and failures in how we can work on decarbonization. I'd like to bring one example, is that we are working very close within human rights. We have a concept locally in Norway where there are a lot of different companies that operates around the world, and we come together, Chatham House rule, discuss and share how do we manage the risk related to human rights. What's your experience? How did you handle that? What's I'm concerned about? Very open discussions on this together with a lot of, there you have oil majors, you have manufacturers, you have others, and these are kind of just examples where you can collaborate and share and develop within a kind of a positive agenda.
Øistein, so you've been working with Achilles as part of that supplier journey. How do collaborations like this help turn sustainability ambition into something operational and measurable?
Coming back to my holistic perspective, we cannot look at our business isolated. So that means that we need to look at responsibilities in our value chain as well. So that means that if I'm buying a product, I want to know more about how that product was made, or kind of the footprint and impact of how that is done. And that means that we need to work with suppliers that kind of share our values, that share the follow regulations, and also operate in a sustainable way. In order to do that, we wanted to do a due diligence of our suppliers to make sure that we have the good suppliers that we can relate to. In addition to that, there's also been a new regulation in Norway, and I've seen it in other countries, and then there's a development of requirements to do a due diligence. And what that did is that it really initiated more formalities and requirements for documentation on how are you actually going to do that. And then we looked at, okay, how are we going to manage, how are we going to solve that? Everyone was starting then to issue questionnaires back and forth to each other. So that means that if you're a supplier to the shipping industry, you will get 100 ship owners sending various different kind of their version of a questionnaire about how they are treating people, what's your policies on climate, what's the climate risk, what's the scope 3 emissions, all these kind of sustainability matters that is important for us to do and to follow the kind of the OECD guidelines of due diligence. So we thought that what if it was a one database or kind of one platform where all the suppliers can provide their data once, and I can go in there and pull out the data. And that means that if you're a supplier, you would have a lot of benefit because you can't answer only one. And for me, the benefit for me is that the data is there, so I don't need to maintain it. It's maintained by the supplier. And we could not really find a good solution before we found the solution from Achilles. And the benefit with Achilles is that is not something that is new and developed and sort of piggyback on the regulation. It's a system that has been there for a long period of time because of their interaction with the oil and gas industry. And that means that there's a lot of suppliers that is already on the platform. And that's one of the key reasons why we thought that this was something that would fit us. So is that when we upload the lists of our suppliers, we saw there was a great overlap. A lot of our suppliers was already there. Then we have this maritime network within Achilles customers that big ship owners and operators that collaborate together. We have, I guess, 50% overlap in our suppliers. And that means that the more ship owners and more operators that are using the same system, kind of almost agnostic to the provider, but let's say you have one system, then would have a lot of benefits. So that's why we are promoting that concept, and where we see that Achilles is something that a platform that are able to provide that for us.
Fantastic. The theme of collaboration in this new world, this kind of once in a century transformation that we're moving through, is very strong. Collaborating with competitors, with suppliers, customers, and companies like Achilles that create the platforms that facilitate and I guess enable this collaboration to happen is really powerful. So let's look into the future, Øistein. Let's say if we look 5-10 years ahead, what does success look like for a company like Odfjell? When it comes to embedding sustainability into core business, what do you think success will ultimately look like?
So I think that what one of our kind of long-term targets is that that we want to embed sustainability into everything that we do. This is not something that is handled by the sustainability department or myself or other key people. It's a kind of a mindset that we integrate into everything that we do. Each time we buy something, each time we sell something, each time we operate a ship, that we look at how we manage people. Is it safe? Do we do it in a sustainable way? Everything is something that is integrated into everyone's thinking. That is, of course, one thing that we aim for, and we are on a good journey. And I think that this is something that is really high on the agenda within our company. We have an incentive model in our company where everyone, all our shore-based, have the same incentives, same incentive model where everyone's get a bonus when we achieve climate targets or climate target trajectories. And that leads me also into the climate element. 10 years ahead, we want to achieve our climate targets 10 years ahead. That meaning that we are following our trajectory on reducing carbon emission, and that we are able to do that in line with the expectancies as a minimum. And if it's possible, that we can go slightly beyond that, because we're coming from a very good position. I would also see that that more and more collaboration is a good thing. We have seen a great example on it on the collective actions that we do within anti-corruption. I think that we as an industry can come and set expectations and requirements for our suppliers. I think that the data transparency is something that you can develop further standards on the way you're reporting it to make it easier for the suppliers. Because I'm a buyer, but on the supplier side, they have a big headache as well. They need to kind of follow all the reports requirements when each ship owner is going to buy things from them. So if it's easy for them, it's easy for us, that we don't that we are able to bring down these administrative hurdles and make things more efficient. That is what good future looks like in my book.
Well, it's an exciting, challenging journey. I think these grey elephants are, they're in the boardroom, as you were saying. There are distinct ones that are quite visible,
and there will become new ones as well.
Absolutely, there will be new ones, and we've got to keep our eye out for them, because otherwise, we often say when a grey elephant appears, it's too late to prepare. You've got to keep your eye out for those weak signals, because when they start to stampede, it's chaos and crisis management. But they represent amazing opportunities to think strategically and actually grab opportunities. So, Øistein, thank you so much for joining us on Elephants in the Boardroom. It's been wonderful listening to your stories and your ideas about how these great forces are impacting your business. If today has sparked ideas, please follow, leave a rating, and pass it on to somebody who should hear about it. Øistein, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Elephants in the Boardroom is brought to you by our friends at Achilles. Achilles is a sustainability supply chain risk management company. Achilles supports the world's biggest companies to create and maintain ethical, sustainable, and transparent supply chains. So while we navigate our way through the elephants in the boardroom, Achilles are leading the way, helping businesses navigate the risks and opportunities associated with many of these grey elephants. If you are a person who's interested in the impacts of change on your supply chains or ESG strategy, it's worth speaking to Achilles. So head over to achilles.com.